The divisional round of the NFL playoffs are officially now in the books, so in this video I want to go ahead and give 5 of my biggest takeaways from the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. But if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, so hit the subscribe button, but let's hop into it. At number 5, Jalen Hurts and his injuries and inconsistencies might hurt the Philadelphia Eagles' Super Bowl chances. Now I'll say this, the one positive thing that I can say about Jalen Hurts and his recent performances is that he hasn't turned the ball over, which is probably the most important thing that he can do at this point of the season. Because with a dominant offensive line, Saquon Barkley, good enough receiving weapons like A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and Dallas Goedert, this offense is going to be good as long as they don't hurt themselves. But when we look back at their 2 playoff games they've played so far against the Green Bay Packers, Jalen Hurts threw for only 131 yards with 2 touchdowns. Again, no interceptions, which is the big thing that I do want you to take away from this. But he only completed 13 passes. And then yet again versus the LA Rams, he was 15 for 20 for 128 yards. Again, I do want to give him his credit in the fact that he isn't turning the ball over. However, going up against the Washington Commanders, and even if they are to somehow beat them and go into the Super Bowl, they're going to need Jalen Hurts to perform a whole lot better than what he's done so far, because I don't think that they can consistently rely upon just Saquon Barkley to be the catalyst of this offense moving forward. Because a team like Washington, even though they are going up against a really good Philadelphia Eagles defense, they will score, they will put up points, and I just don't know if this Philadelphia Eagles offense can go tat for tat versus a really good offensive team like Washington, especially if Jalen Hurts doesn't play well. Again, I don't think he's playing bad per se, but I think the thing is with him is that you need him to throw for over 200 yards and play clean football and just keep this offense balanced, because right now I don't think that teams really respect Jalen Hurts and his arm right now. Again, if you can stack the box against Saquon Barkley and really make his day difficult, I think you kind of shut out this Eagles offense, which that is a very hard thing to do, to shut out Saquon Barkley. But if you can at least limit him, it makes things a whole lot harder for this Eagles team. And you best believe that if the Eagles somehow beat the Commanders, if they go into the Super Bowl going up against a team like Buffalo or the Chiefs, where they are going to score points and they both have really good defenses, it's going to make things very difficult for this Eagles team to actually win this game. Again, Saquon Barkley is a freak of nature, and he will get his yardage when he can get his yardage. He will make a couple explosive plays here and there, but is it enough to have this team make it all the way to the Super Bowl and win the whole thing? I don't know. Again, going up against the Rams and the Packers, those are 2 pretty good teams, but let's just keep it real. I don't think they necessarily dominated either one of those games. Saquon Barkley on his own behalf, though, was dominant, which we are going to need him to continue to do so through the rest of the playoffs. If he can continue to average over 150 rushing yards a game, then yeah, they got a pretty good shot at this. But ultimately, when you're going up against better teams that have better defensive players, I think they could more than likely slow down Saquon Barkley. Not shut him down, but slow him up. And so if that does happen, then you're going to have to rely upon Jalen Hurts to make more complex reads, to throw the ball with some anticipation, and well, recently we haven't seen him really do so. And now that he's injured and banged up and not necessarily the same threat in the rushing portion of his game, I think it does severely limit what this Eagles team could do, because they are going to be seemingly extremely one-dimensional. So we'll have to wait and see what Kellen Moore and what Jalen Hurts are able to come up with. Is Jalen Hurts actually really banged up, or is he going to be able to run the football? Those are things they're going to have to answer over these next couple of days as they get ready for the Commanders, because that Commanders team is pretty dang good. Coming in at number 4 is the Kansas City Chiefs are inevitable and they just don't make mistakes. This is probably my biggest takeaway so far of the playoffs, is just the fact that Kansas City, while they may not be the most explosive offense, and while their defense may not be the greatest defense in the entire league, though they're a pretty darn good defense, they can find ways to win by just simply playing a better brand of football when it matters most, and also just taking advantage of every opportunity. In a game where the Houston Texans outgained the Kansas City Chiefs by over 100 yards, they outgained them passing the ball by over 20 yards, they outran them by almost 100 yards, they still lost the game because of a couple reasons. The Houston Texans made mistakes. They had missed field goals. They had a couple drop passes. They had a 4th down conversion that didn't go their way. 8 sacks allowed. Whereas the opposite side, the Kansas City Chiefs, sure, they didn't pass the ball for that many yards, only for 177, but even though they didn't throw the ball that much, Patrick Mahomes made the plays when it mattered most. When they had easy field position, they went down and they scored. When the opposing team made a mistake, the Chiefs took advantage of it. Again, they only threw the ball for 177 yards. They only ran the ball for like 50 yards. Yet despite that, they still won the game, and well, they won the game handily. You can make the argument that the Houston Texans actually outplayed the Kansas City Chiefs throughout the game. The difference was the Chiefs just didn't make mistakes. They just played clean football and end up working in their favor. Now, yes, you could definitely point to some questionable officiating, which I do want to at least mention because some of those calls were just straight up disgusting. But at the end of the day, you got to give credit to this offense for when you do get those penalties and when things do go your way, you take advantage of them and you go down and score. On that terrible roughing the passer call, they went down and they scored. On that terrible unnecessary roughness call on Patrick Mahomes, where the Texans had two players run into each other, yet they thought that it hit Patrick Mahomes, they went down and they scored. They took advantage of those opportunities, whereas the Houston Texans just didn't do so. Again, officiating was terrible in the game. I do want to just say that, but it wasn't the reason why the Chiefs won the game, even though it did definitely help them in their attempt to win the game. Moving forward, if you want to beat this Kansas City Chiefs team, you have to do more than just simply outgain them. You have to do more than simply just slow down the rushing attack or slowing down Patrick Mahomes. You have to win the turnover battle. You have to win the special teams. You have to win the margins. You can't have too many penalties, so on and so forth. At the end of the day, you're not just playing the Chiefs, you're also playing their crowd, and you're also playing, sadly, the referees. When you go up against this Chiefs team, it is a full team effort and you have to overcome so much, and it's going to be quite difficult for the Bills to do so, even though I do think the Bills have the better offense, and in a lot of ways I think their defense holds up as well. Just comes down to, can they actually legitimately take advantage of their opportunities against a team like Kansas City that knows exactly what it takes to win games? If they can do so, Buffalo will stand a chance, but if they can't do so, then Kansas City will find a way to win the game like they always do. It may not be pretty, it may be a little ugly, but when it comes down to it, they make the plays when it matters most. Number 3, and this one sucks, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens consistently underperform in the playoffs, and I just don't know why. Now, before this turned into, oh, Lamar Jackson isn't clutch in the playoffs, oh, Lamar Jackson consistently underperforms in the playoffs, I don't necessarily think that he is the main reason why they lost this game. He did have the 2 turnovers, which were not so good turnovers, let's just be honest, but I don't think it was the reason why they lost the game. Ultimately, they had a chance to tie the game up late, and then Mark Andrews had a terrible drop pass that was right in his hands. I believe he also had another drop pass a couple plays earlier, not to mention he also had a really bad fumble that simply just should not have happened. If you take away those small little things, in a lot of ways this Ravens team could have beat Buffalo. It wasn't a game where Buffalo really outplayed Baltimore. In fact, in multiple occasions I felt like Baltimore outplayed Buffalo. Really, if you look at it, Buffalo won like one quarter, and that was like the second quarter, and every other quarter Baltimore won, yet Buffalo won the game. And the biggest reason why was, well, the Baltimore Ravens underperformed by having 3 turnovers. Those 3 turnovers were the reason why they lost the game. A blitz doesn't get picked up on Matt Milano when Lamar Jackson throws it into coverage and it gets picked off. That's on Lamar Jackson, but that's also on this really good offensive line. The Lamar Jackson fumble, that was on Lamar Jackson. You can't be doing that. You have to get rid of the football, take care of the football, don't turn the ball over, and well, you turn the ball over, you give it to Von Miller, he goes down the field, and then eventually they score. Also, you can't have a drop pass in the end zone when the game is on the line. You have to catch that football. And also, Mark Andrews, you can't be lollygagging out there and fumble the ball on a play where you should have just slid down. It's those small little plays that give these teams like Buffalo the chance to win these games. Again, in a lot of ways, Baltimore kind of outplayed Buffalo for 3 of the 4 quarters. But that one quarter that Buffalo dominated, and then them also taking advantage of the turnover battle, is why ultimately the Ravens lost this game. It's a consistent pattern where the Baltimore Ravens consistently play decently in the playoffs, where they get a lot of yards, they score a bunch of points, but turnovers and a couple drop passes here and there are the reason why they lose these games. Now, I'm not going to sit here and overreact and say, oh, Lamar Jackson can't win a championship, because I just don't think that's true. I do think Lamar Jackson's an awesome quarterback. I still think their window is clearly open. I really hope that next year they go all in on this team yet again and try to put together the best roster they physically can to go all in 2026. But truth be told, I do think the clock is ticking, because ultimately Lamar Jackson's contract is going to be big. Derrick Henry will eventually move on, and well, this team is just going to get a little bit older, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult to fuel this roster like they have the past few years. So for this Ravens team, the clock is ticking. You have to go all in right now because this is your best chance to do it. And unfortunately, it was a sad ending to what was a really promising year. Number 2, the future of the Detroit Lions is somewhat concerning. Now, in a lot of ways, the things you could take away from this Lions game is just the fact that they were just not 100% healthy. Against that Commanders team, Jaden Daniels was awesome. We'll talk about him here in a second, but ultimately that Lions defense was just so banged up with multiple starters not being able to go at 100%. And because of that, I do think it gave the Washington Commanders an actual legitimate chance to win the game. Early on, it looked like Detroit was going to run away with this thing. They went down and they scored. They had a couple of things go their way. And then a couple of turnovers happened. And then next thing you know, they're behind by 10. You could talk about the turnover issues in this game. That was a really poor performance from Jared Goff. But ultimately, this game had me more thinking about the future of this team because you have to think about it. They're probably going to lose Ben Johnson. At least we think he is going to go head coach somewhere else. Probably going to lose Aaron Glenn for the exact same reason as Ben Johnson. Jared Goff's contract is still going to be massive. You're also getting a little bit older. Yes, you'll bring back some veterans, but losing your OC and your DC, which many people regard as some of the best in the NFL, and having to replace them with more than likely younger guys who maybe have been learning behind these guys but haven't actually been the guy calling the plays is going to be quite difficult, especially in a 2026 season where you expect a lot of other teams to be a whole lot better next year. That Washington team is good, but they are not as good as the Detroit Lions. Again, injuries happened, and yes, I do believe that injuries played a major factor into why the Detroit Lions lost this game, but ultimately speaking, you had to find a way to win this one so that you had another week to try to go up there and win a championship. It didn't work out for you. And as I said earlier, I am somewhat concerned about their future. I'm not necessarily hitting the panic button or anything. I'm not somebody who says, oh, Jared Goff can't win a championship. No, I think that the roster around him is really, really good, and I think Jared Goff is playing at a high enough level to where they can win a championship with him at the quarterback position. But what has to happen is Jared Goff has to play better in the playoffs. He can't turn the ball over multiple times. They can't consistently do these disgusting, weird trick plays in untimely moments, especially that Jameson Williams one that turned into a turnover. They have to find a way to potentially replace both their coordinators, which is a little bit concerning for me, and you still have to find a way to replace some of your older veterans while finding ways to improve on this team. Your offensive line is getting a little bit older in the interior of the line. Your defensive backs have to get paid. Your secondary is still pretty strong with or without Carlton Davis, but he's better obviously with him. And then your defensive line has some question marks with it as well. Ultimately speaking, I do think 2026 will be another good year for the Detroit Lions. I have no concerns about that, but I do think that this was one of their window years that they ultimately failed on. But with that said, let's go ahead and talk about number 1. Jaden Daniels might just be having the greatest rookie season for a quarterback ever. Now, I do want to say this. There have been many good quarterbacks that have had excellent rookie seasons. There have been some that have made the playoffs and have had some pretty sizable runs. But I think the difference between a lot of those quarterbacks and Jaden Daniels is the simple fact that Washington last year was a 4-win team, and now this year they're in the NFC Championship game, and to be honest with you, I kind of think they might be the favorites to beat the Eagles and make it to a Super Bowl. And when you look back at their offseason, it wasn't like this awe-inspiring offseason. They got Dan Quinn, who a lot of people, including myself, were not a big fan of. They went out there and signed a bunch of veterans where there were some question marks regarding their career. Guys like Dorrance Armstrong, who I guess not a veteran per se, but he wasn't a star. Dante Fowler, who had a lot of question marks. Austin Eckler, Bobby Wagner, so on and so forth. And sure, they made some awesome moves like getting Mike Sarenstill in the second round, Frankie Louvu, and all those guys. Sure, there were some good moves, but there was a lot of questions surrounding this team. Heading into the season, I projected that this Washington team would take a big step forward, but I thought at best maybe 8 to 9 wins at best. I did not expect them to go up there, win double-digit games, and arguably be one of the best teams in the NFC. Jaden Daniels has also been the main reason why this team has taken such a massive step forward. This offense isn't terribly different from what they had last year. Sure, you brought in guys like Tyler Biadasz, you have Zach Ertz, and then of course Austin Eckler, and a couple other pieces here and there, but for the most part, the main core group of guys is basically the same as last year, just with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. You have Terry McLaurin, you brought in Jahan Dotson, which a good pickup, but you know, he's not a particularly great player. You still have Brian Robinson. Your offensive line while improved, is kind of similar to what it was last year. The difference is Jaden Daniels simply is that much of a difference maker and can just make up for so much with his legs and with his playmaking ability. I don't think I've ever seen a quarterback come in year one, take a team to an NFC Championship game, especially when that team the year prior was not very good. I know we said some similar things about CJ Stroud, and I still want to give Stroud his credit for an incredible rookie season, but he did not lead that team to a conference championship game. In fact, they kind of got blown out in the second round to the Ravens last year. And what I will say is, yes, that Texans team was really bad, but it wasn't like horrendously bad where it had no talent. I thought that team was underperforming given the talent that they had. This was a Washington team that has basically been retooled and rebuilt all in kind of one major offseason. A lot of the key guys who are playing massive minutes for this team are guys that were brought in just one offseason. And that's unbelievably impressive from not just Jaden Daniels' perspective, but from Dan Quinn's perspective, to have all these guys come in who, some are veterans, some are young guys, come into this team 1 year ago, buy into what this team is doing, and now look at where they're at. I think you have to give a lot of credit to Dan Quinn, but you also have to give a ton of credit to Jaden Daniels because I think he's having an awesome rookie season. But you guys, let me know in the comment section below, what do you guys think about my takeaways, and what takeaways do you guys have? But if you enjoyed the video, hit the like and subscribe button. Again, road to 10K. Love you guys. Peace.